you're very welcome to the Guaranteed Irish Pharmaceutical Forum for 2021. The theme this year is about future-proofing Ireland's thriving pharmaceutical sector in 2021 and beyond. We've come through a very tough year, and for sure the pharmaceutical sector has given us opportunity to hope in the coming months. Recent years have seen successful collaboration between government, the healthcare system and the pharmaceutical sector to address critical challenges such as COVID and Brexit indeed, and ensure patients are prioritised. Our panel of key decision makers will discuss today how this collaborative, patient-centric approach can be built upon to reshape healthcare delivery in Ireland for the better in the next decade and ensure our pharmaceutical sector continues to thrive and grow. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Lorraine Nolan, CEO of the HPRA, by Mairead McCall, Managing Director of MSD Ireland and Human Health. And indeed, Mairead has just been appointed as Managing Director to MSD and has also been appointed to represent the pharmaceutical sector on the board of Guaranteed Irish. So we're delighted to have Mairead, who will chair once I've done the initial intros. And Darren Morrissey, CEO of NIBRD, and Matt Moran, Director of Biopharmachem Ireland in IBEC. The session will be live and is welcoming Q&As from you. You might put them in your Q&A box and we'll take them at the end of the session to the various different panelists. For me, that's about it. And I just want to hand you over to Mairead now, who will chair and ask the questions of the panel. And I hope you enjoy the session. It should be over within the hour.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at today's breakfast briefing, which has been hosted by Guaranteed Irish. And today what we're going to focus on is how we can future-proof Ireland's thriving pharmaceutical sector beyond 2021. I'm delighted to chair this event and to see such positive representation from our important sector. As Breed has already mentioned, I've just recently been appointed as Managing Director of MSD Ireland, the Human Health Division, and I'm also the pharmaceutical sector representative on the Guaranteed Irish board. So MSD have been proud members of Guaranteed Irish now for over 10 years, and there are great synergies between our operations and the Guaranteed Irish ethos. We have 6 sites across Ireland, and we play a very active part in the communities in which we operate. And we provide sustainable, highly skilled and long-term jobs. And at the moment, we've over 2,700 employees nationwide. Over the last few years, we're a company that has gone from strength to strength, and we've increased our investment across our sites. And we've acquired new sites and new business areas. We're proud members of the thriving pharmaceutical sector in Ireland. As many of you know, it's a hugely significant area. Currently, there are 30,000 people directly employed by the pharmaceutical industry, and roughly the same amount again, so another 30,000 employed indirectly. The world's 10 largest pharma companies are based here. And in Ireland, we are the 7th largest exporter of medicinal and pharmaceutical products in the world. So it's a great thing of pride that many of the medicines that are made here that benefit patients around the globe. And as a sector, we continue to create these sustainable jobs almost on a weekly basis. You hear different announcements. We're committed to Ireland, and we're committed to ensuring that this sector continues to grow and to thrive. We really welcome the opportunity this morning, therefore, to have the discussion about how we can really anticipate the trends that are coming down the road and ensure that we are well skilled and resourced to meet these needs. So with that, I am going to just rotate around the panel and ask each of our panel members to introduce themselves. So I'll start with you there, Lorraine.
Thanks very much, Mairead. And apologies, I was just trying to unmute myself. You can hear me? Yeah. Brilliant. Good morning, everybody. As Marie has said, my name is Lorraine Nolan, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Health Products Regulatory Authority. And I can appreciate in the audience this morning, there may be people that are perhaps not familiar with the work of my agency. And I suppose just to explain it simply, we regulate medicines and medical devices and other healthcare products, and that means we ensure they're of a suitable quality, they're safe, and that they are effective for use in the Irish market. And I hope that, I guess, one of the outcomes of the COVID pandemic, I think it's really thrown a huge spotlight on the work of agencies like ours at a national level, and hopefully we are beginning to become more of a household name because of that. Just a little bit about my own background. I guess I'm myself very much so a guaranteed Irish product in many ways, in that I'm entirely educated in Ireland at primary, secondary, and third level. I have to say I am very, very grateful, especially for the education that I received at secondary school level, because it very much so directed me towards science, and that was in the 1980s, so you can add up my age based on that. But at that time period, there was a huge vision, I think, for the sector in Ireland as a future employer, and we were very much pushed that way. Absolute privilege to work in the area, and it has been for almost 30 years of my working life at this stage, in that I think the work we do every day really makes a huge difference to the lives of people in our country and across the globe, and that's a great privilege. I also would echo exactly what you've said, Mairead, in the beginning. We are very, very good at this in Ireland. It is one of our real successes, and it is something we really should celebrate more. And there's many reasons for that. I think skills and expertise is one of them. And the other, I would say, is that we continuously invest in this in the sector. So delighted for the opportunity to be here this morning. I want to thank Breach for it. I always enjoy discussions where we're talking about the future and how we need to move forward. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Lorraine. And Breed, maybe if you want to give a couple of words about yourself.
You're muted.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Guaranteed Irish, I'm the CEO of it, and we've gone through an iteration in the last 4 years whereby we support all businesses based in Ireland, not just the Indigenous. So welcoming the international and multinational to the board, because that is what is reflective of Ireland and business landscape in Ireland now. I'm delighted to throw a spotlight on pharmaceutical, and MSJ have been real stalwarts in that space, as have all the panel participants here today. But pharmaceutical has often been left out of the discussion because they are multinationals, or they're seen as the big pharmas, and that's something we really want to dispel, and we want to support both the pharmaceutical and medical device sector, because there is, first of all, they're in a massive employer. Secondly, they're looking to the future probably a lot more than a lot of the other sectors, and they're looking at future investment and thinking ahead in terms of trends all the time. So it's something we really welcome, and we really are trying to foster the culture of making sure they're very much part of the voice of all businesses that are the makeup of the board of Guaranteed Irish. And we see them as real innovative and global leaders. So we really want to support that. Obviously, they're very supportive of jobs, which is the main criteria of Guaranteed Irish's existence, to support jobs, to support communities, and to support provenance. So we're delighted to be part of it, and it's our privilege to have the panel we have this morning. Thanks, Marie.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Breed. And Darren, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Mairead. Well, look, to introduce myself first, I'm Darren Morrissey, the CEO of the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Training. That is a mouthful, otherwise known as NIBRT. NIBRT was established just over 10 years ago as a really innovative partnership between IDA Ireland and a number of the higher education institutes, most notably UCD, TCD, DCU were involved, and Sligo IT. And we're housed in a bespoke facility, which you can see over my shoulder here, on the grounds of UCD. And really, I suppose that the vision was to serve the needs of a growing biopharmaceutical industry. So biopharma is, I suppose, the offshoot from traditional pharma, where you're manufacturing monoclonal antibodies, complex proteins, and you do it in a particularly technologically involved way. And there was a feeling back about 12 or 13 years ago that Ireland needed to invest in the skills, the talent, and the research to support that industry and to attract foreign direct investment players in the space. So over the last 10 years, IDA Ireland has been massively successful in attracting over 10 billion euros worth of investment, the capital investment into the country. That's created over 30,000 direct jobs and countless more indirect jobs, support jobs in the area. And I'm really happy to say that NIBRT has played a very strong role in the sense that we've trained the majority of the staff that have gone through those facilities and are now housed in those facilities. We train over 4,500 people on average per year in the facility, and we engage in really successful collaborative research with the players in the biopharma space. And Mairead, just to reference, I mean, to give you a sense of the impact it has on Ireland, MSD have 4 biopharma focused facilities at this point in Dunboyne, in Carlow, in Swords, and in Brinny and Cork. We engage with MSD and train all of the people in those sites. And I would say one other thing, FDI, foreign direct investment, has been the primary focus, but of course an ecosystem always builds up around a foreign direct investment play. And increasingly we're training and we're doing research with vendors, support services for that industry, and also increasingly indigenous players in the biopharma space as well. So that's just an introduction to me, and thanks for the opportunity to be on the panel today.
Great, thank you, Darren. And Matt.
Thanks, Mairead. My name is Matt Moran. I'm Director of Biopharmachem Ireland, and we're a trade association within IBEC, the major lobby group in Ireland. Biopharmachem Ireland, actually I established it myself over 25 years ago, and we represent all manufacturing, supply and global business services for the entire, I suppose, span of the industry. So that includes small molecule, large molecular, chemical and biotech. And obviously our priority is to continue to grow that sector. It's been, I think, very successful for the country. And again, I would echo Darren's comments, the importance of, I suppose, building out the cluster and also supporting Indigenous as well as multinational investment. Myself, I, again, like Lorraine, a product of the Irish education system, so I'm guaranteed Irish. I've qualifications in chemistry, chemical engineering. Also, I have an MBA from UCD. Before working for IBEC, I actually worked in the pharmaceutical industry and manufacturing, both in API manufacture, that's active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacture, and also in the manufacture of biologics, including sterile processing, freeze drying, so on and so forth. So I've had quite a lot of exposure to the industry itself, and that probably explains the color of my hair, which is a very trendy silver or blonde. Delighted to be here, and delighted to be here with colleagues whom I know are working very hard to keep this country on track and ensure that it moves forward, which it will do. And obviously very appreciative to MSD, your company, Mairead, who are one of our main members. And I'm more than acutely aware of the huge contribution that your company makes to this country and makes this country throughout the regions, which I think is very important to emphasize as well. So great to be here. Breach, thanks for the invite.
Great, thank you, Matt. And Matt, I'll just stay with you if that's okay. I have a couple of questions for you. So just in terms of the future trends for biopharma manufacturing globally, how well do you think that the Irish industry is actually positioned to exploit these trends? Sure,
that's a good question, Mairead. I mean, as colleagues have mentioned, this is a very important industry. In fact, it's worth over 80 billion euros in exports, which is over half the figures exported from the country. So it plays a critical role in supporting the economy. And I think recently it's played an ever more critical role because the industry has stayed operational throughout the COVID-19 pandemic or crisis. The industry has grown really over the last 50 years from one based around small molecule to one based now around biotech or large molecule manufacture. And when you look globally and see where the next opportunities, it would very much seem to be in the advanced therapeutic space, sometimes known as ATMPs, sometimes known as CGT or cell and gene therapy. And when you look at the evolution of development in new companies, you see just under 1,000 companies have now, I suppose, emerged in this space. And when you look at then at clinical activity, there's over 1,000 clinical trials in these new products. So broadly speaking, you're looking at gene therapy, cellular therapy, tissue engineering, immuno-oncology, so on and so forth. And really, this is a priority for us as an industry association to ensure that Ireland is part of this, because I think this is very important, that as a country which depends on the sector, that we stay at the cutting edge. So there's a lot of work going on within our own association, and I know that Darren will speak to this point afterwards, because NIBRD are doing a huge amount of work in that area too. And we see it as a huge opportunity, and we think that as an industry, we've work to do, but I think we're relatively well positioned in that we managed to transition from small molecule to large molecule relatively smoothly. So when you look at manufacturing, the whole area of advanced therapeutics is only developing at the moment. So now is the time to invest, and now is the time to, I think, deploy the skills that we've proven that we have in the manufacture of such products. So in short, I see the opportunity in the future as being advanced therapeutics. I also see the opportunity to sustain our installed base, which is to ensure that we continue to manufacture those products we do, which will still be required by the marketplace and by patients, as efficiently and as effectively as we can. And I think, again, as an industry, we have a proven track record in that whole manufacturing and supply space. And I'll just finish that we do see also the evolution and development of what I would call global business services as becoming an increasingly important part of the sector, whereby major multinationals tend to concentrate particular skill sets or capabilities into one location. And Ireland, I think, has proven capable of doing that. And there are examples, companies such as Novartis, Lilly, Pfizer, etc., having been successful there. And finally, I do see an opportunity on the Indigenous side. And I think especially in the advanced therapeutics area, there is room for local companies to grow, either in the specialist service sector or indeed in the research sector as well. So overall optimistic, but we do need to seize this opportunity. It won't happen automatically. And I know from where I sit that every other location in the world is also considers them to be the best location for advanced therapeutics. So we'll need to compete, and we've done that in the past. And I think with the good work of IDA Ireland, NIBRD Enterprise Ireland, SFI, this will work. And finally, before I finish, just to emphasize the importance of having a strong regulator in Ireland. This is a competitive advantage for Ireland. HPRA play a huge role in that. And that is something that I think we need to support and sustain into the future. So that's, sorry for going on a bit, but that's
that's great. Thank you for that, Matt. You referenced the COVID pandemic. How do you feel that the sector has actually dealt with the pandemic? And do you feel that that the pandemic has thrown up any opportunities for the sector?
Sure. Well, firstly, as a sector, we've stayed operational, which was our main objective, and in very difficult operating environments. Most companies have had to put in place significant measures to ensure that they comply with guidelines, and also their staff stay safe, and they're able to actually produce. And they've done that successfully. And the industry essentially has stayed fully operational. In fact, if anything, has increased its output during the COVID-19 period. Looking at opportunities, it's interesting. I've obviously had a number of interactions with colleagues in the European Commission and in Europe, and we have seen supply chain difficulties emerge around COVID-19, and many of these arose due to the dependence for some components of pharmaceuticals, such as active pharmaceutical ingredients, on third countries. And I mean, the example which is cited often is that of paracetamol, which depends on an active which was supplied in India. And India simply closed its borders, obviously focusing on its own market. And this prompted shortages. And the number of shortages have occurred with some key products. So I think the European Commission has recognized this. And in their new pharmaceutical strategy, which they only published at the end of last year, they reference focusing on supply chain. They reference focusing on EU-based manufacturing. And as Ireland is one of the leading hubs for manufacture in the world, this must be an opportunity for our existing companies, and potentially for new companies. So especially in the small molecule area, where we've been very successful, I think by applying, I think, clever and efficient manufacturing, we should be able to ensure that we can sustain this manufacturing base. And I think that we're very happy to play our role there, and also to play our role on the European stage as well, because I think that I think it's informed European policymakers that supply chains are vital and critical, and that having access to all parts of the supply chain is of extreme importance, and that cost is not the only driver. Accessibility, security of supply are also very important drivers. So there, I think, lies an opportunity which indirectly has flowed out of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great. And Darren, if it's okay, I'll just jump to you for a moment. Matt referenced, you know, the importance of us staying ahead of the curve in many respects. And from your perspective, what new skills and capabilities do you feel that we need here in Ireland to ensure that we continue to develop the talent that's needed both now and into the future?
You know, it's a great question. First and foremost, I would say that we have a fantastic bedrock of skills and talent and capabilities already in the country to build on. So we're not starting from scratch here. I think that, I mean, Matt has referenced advanced therapies, as he said, otherwise known as cell and gene therapies, or certainly cell and gene therapies fit in under that category. I would add in there actually novel vaccines as well, in the context of the new modality vaccines. I'm sure Lorraine will probably reference when she's talking regulatory wise, mRNA vaccines and different ways of delivering vaccines falls into that category. So there's no doubt that there are certain skill sets that we need to build up in the manufacturing of those areas. Now, again, I have a particular manufacturing focus through NIBRT, but it's not to say that upstream of manufacturing in the development area there wouldn't be skills as well. But we're acutely conscious that to attract foreign direct investment in and to build indigenous industry in the space, we need to build up particular skills in the gene therapy space. Gene therapy specifics would be, you know, you've got viral based and, again, very novel non-viral based gene therapies. Again, there's particular manufacturing technologies there that we need to become proficient in. Cell therapy manufacturing, I mean, cell therapy is essentially, you know, taking a cell and making a medicine of it, for want of a better term. The manufacturing, the quality around the manufacturing of therapy ready cells for use in patients, it involves, you know, again, a massive skill set shift, and most notably focused on the quality side. And novel vaccines in a similar way. So I think ATMPs and cell and gene therapies is one big category of new skills need building. But overlapping with that, I think, is if you look at the technology area, I mean, technology has made an influence, or is having an influence across everything we do in life. It's having an influence on the manufacturing sector, but probably is having the slowest, but will have the most profound impact on pharma manufacturing and biopharma manufacturing. So for regulatory reasons, you can't just switch everything to robotics-based manufacturing or AI delivery. However, we're going there. And again, I don't want to tee you up too much, Lorraine, but you might mention that later on. But I know certainly the FDA internationally have shifted the gears over the last 5 or 6 years to embrace the idea of smart ways of delivering medicinal products. So the whole concept of, again, buzz terms, factory of the future, biopharma 4.0, encapsulating things like data analytics, digital technologies, AI and robotics. That's absolutely a skill set that we need to be working on as well. And just by way of referencing the importance here, there's an annual publication on trends, and they analyze, again, shifting trends in the landscape, and there are new roles starting to appear as being very important, and that pharma companies are now starting to recruit for. one in particular are automation engineers I picked up on in the last few months, encapsulating digital data engineering and processing, which is something that you wouldn't have seen on the gamut of roles in biopharma manufacturing in the past. So that's a kind of an interesting thing to see. And I'll give a shameless plug at this point. I would say NIBRD are stepping into all of these areas in our training programs and our training catalog for 2021. Actually, we have a number of courses on vaccine manufacturing, stem cell manufacturing, introductory short courses in gene therapy, and then we have a Facility of the Future Biopharma 4.0 courses as well. So simply click on our website and you'll get access to these. We have open courses that anyone can attend. Have I lost you, Mairead?
I think Mairead is actually frozen there for a minute.
At least I thought it might be me, but
I'm sure she'll be back to us momentarily.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thanks for that, Darren. In the meantime, Lorraine, oh, maybe she's just gone there. She's going to dial in again.
Back in, yeah.
Lorraine, obviously, looking at the future, Lorraine, from your own perspective with the HPRA, 2020 has been an incredible year for everyone, particularly with the spotlight on medicines and vaccines. The HPRA and regulators across the globe are required to be exceptionally agile to address many issues presented by the pandemic. What processes worked well, do you think? And was there anything you might have done differently? Can I just ask?
Thanks, Bridge, for that question. And I think that's obviously a key question on everybody's mind, is given the experience of the past year, which has just been incredible. You know, what does this all mean for the future? And just to maybe come back to a couple of points that Darren sort of mentioned, in his questions there, I think, when we go back to this time last year, we were only beginning to talk about COVID-19 and not even let alone any possibility of there being a vaccine. And then I remember at the very beginning of this, the possibility of RNA vaccines, among regulatory circles, everybody was saying, gosh, imagine if that really happened. And look, it's happened. And, it's not just about vaccines. I think the future in this area, and I think that the use of this kind of technology, in other areas like oncology, the possibilities are phenomenal. And quite simply, it's an incredible moment for science. And, regardless of what regulators have done or haven't done, I think huge credit is due to the wider scientific community, and particularly the pharmaceutical sector itself. Not only has it kept going, but look what it has brought forward. So it has been a privilege to be part of that. And I really do think for the future, my hope is that for the next generation of kids coming through in Ireland, this really, really invigorates the interest of science and kind of pushes a new generation in that direction, because fantastic careers. In terms of regulation itself, I think we've seen a lot of what people term as flexibility, but I would definitely say it's been much more about agile approaches. And I would also say what has worked extremely well during the pandemic circumstances is the engagement between the regulatory side and the industry side. Any agility that was taken on board wasn't done in isolation. It was really taking on board the areas the industry had identified as being key and pertinent for them to enable them to keep going. So, it was a very much so a collaborative approach. Also, I would say that, it wasn't a national or European approach, very much so a global effort, in that the level of dialogue among regulators across the globe is nothing like 20 years of working in this area. We've been on weekly calls, US FDA, PDMA, Japan. So it's been a totally globalized effort. And that's not just in relation to the area of vaccine and therapeutic development, but in the whole area of flexibility and agility and approaches and sharing of experience, which has just been fantastic. So, we have seen a huge level of rapid scientific advice being given and accelerated assessments to support the development of vaccines and therapeutics. We've also seen massive levels of flexibility in terms of what was called an exceptional change management process that was put in at European level, but largely mimicked the approaches that were used by regulators across the globe, which literally, enabled the industry, where there was critical need, to make regulatory changes and to do those and to kind of update the regulatory system afterwards. So that is a huge level of flexibility. Also the switch, I think, to, the conduct of oversight in a virtual capacity, and then using technology to exchange and, regulatory information and dialogue, particularly with the healthcare sector itself. I think one of the best examples that we've really seen of the adapted approach is in the area of inspections that I've mentioned, taking into account that a lot of facilities went remotely. We quickly adapted our own procedures, and I think that has worked very well and very successfully for us. And when we're speaking about the future, I think one of the big challenging areas for most regulators is inspection skill, inspection capacity. So I think there's a huge, emerging dialogue among the regulatory community internationally as to what the shape of the future inspection model will look like. Because certainly I think it will change on foot of this pandemic, particularly when you think about the globalization of the industry, the level of travel that's actually involved. I think working remotely and enhancing mutual reliance. So that's using this, and leveraging from the inspection processes that are done by other regulators globally presents a huge opportunity. There are things that worked extremely well. Some things didn't work well, and that is something that we do have to reflect on. And I would definitely take us back to the first wave, particularly around the periods of March and April. A lot of pressure, I think, came on the health sector, particularly in the area of medical devices, in the area of ventilators, personal protective equipment, in vitro diagnostics and consumables. And I think that probably showed a lot of shortcomings in the regulatory framework, for medical devices, particularly from, supply and availability point of view, supply chain traceability. And I know Matt has spoken about the emergency package that the Commission has brought in and the focus under the pharmaceutical strategy. I do think, there's an awful lot coming with the new framework for medical devices in Europe that really, I think the pandemic experience has really shown more than anything is the need for a successful implementation of that framework. So, looking ahead in the future, where does this bring us? I think, to be honest about this, I think the level of effort that has gone in on the regulatory side has been phenomenal. I mean, for us, it has been 10 months of working 7 days a week to 12 to 18 hours per day. The sustainability of that, just in normal times is just not possible. And, it's getting the balance across all the areas of focus. There's definitely learnings from there in terms of, how we can better support innovation and how, we can bring lots of good practices forward. And I definitely believe the regulatory system is open to that. It's going to be one of the core pillars with regard to the implementation of the pharma strategy in Europe, but also on an international basis, the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, which has been the forum through which a lot of the exchange on a global basis between regulators has happened, is actively really looking at a huge reflection exercise on the learnings from the pandemic. What are the practices we should take forward? And what I think is really good about this is not just like a European focus or a national focus, it's a global focus. And I think, for the future of convergence and harmonization across the regulatory regions, I think that is absolutely the way we have to do it. So it'll be very exciting to see what comes from there. And I know from the regulatory perspective, there's definitely an appetite to kind of learn from this and move forward in a different way as well.
Great, and apologies, I dropped off there. The joys of working from home that we've all experienced. Lorraine, I think you've referenced this already, but I suppose what do you see as the opportunities for the HPRA in the medium to longer term, and how are you preparing for that?
I would say actually both Matt and probably Darren have set me up very well in terms of giving you the answer to this question, because I would say the opportunity for us, very much so along the lines of what they have set out, I think the increasing complexity of products in essence, while it is challenging, it's also a huge opportunity for us. And, this is the trend of the future. Products are simply becoming more complex. They're non-traditional. They require non-traditional manufacturing methods, non-traditional use. So, I think agility and flexibility is going to be a huge kind of consideration for us into the future. I think for us as an organization, I mean, this isn't new. I mean, we recognized this back a decade ago, and we really did start to prepare for it. And particularly, I think, in the cell and gene therapy space. I'm not saying we're totally there yet, but we really have made huge strides over the last 6 years in terms of investing in skills within our organization. In terms of the wider innovation support, I mean, we really step changed our offering since 2016, and that was concentrating both nationally and on contribution to the work of the European Medicines Agency. So, you know, we've been very successful in relation to this. I mean, our own innovation office was launched, and at this point, it's taking well in excess of 100 innovation queries per year. And they are really very much so split in the key innovation trend areas of convergence between products, the ATMP side, but also at a European level, the establishment of the innovation network through the EMA, which is a hub and spoke line model. So centrally coordinated through the EMA, but a link to the innovation offices in all of the national agencies. We made quite a good investment in 2020 last year, in that we decided to put forward our own candidacy for the co-chairing of that innovation network on behalf of Europe. And Larry O'Dwyer, a member of our team, who is our innovation manager, has been appointed as the co-chair of that innovation network. So I think for us, in terms of future investment, that's fantastic positioning in terms of the European network. We are at a very exciting stage. We are about to launch a new 5-year strategy that we were working on over 2020, and supporting innovation will be, again, one of the key pillars of that strategy. And no surprise there, I would say, to anybody that works in the sector. But what we really want to do in this is to kind of have a very fine-tuned focus on exactly the areas that we are carving out for ourselves as an organization, you know, to move forward. So to support what both Matt and Darren has said, obviously cell and gene therapies are going to be part of that strategy, but it's about building our skill set. Darren definitely brought up the whole area of digitalization and technology in his introduction, and that is something we are very actively considering. It's a very active discussion too across the European regulatory network, and, you know, among regulatory circles internationally. I would say Europe is perceived in the whole digitalization agenda as lagging probably behind some of the other international regions, particularly US FDA. So one of the things that the EMA has done over the last year is it established the big data task force. And from that, it published a report in 2019, and then it established a steering group to really look at the area of what are the regulatory requirements, what are the skills requirements for us in Europe to accelerate this moving forward. It's moving at a very, very fast pace. And I think one of the advantages sometimes of being behind is you do get to learn from how others have done things very well. So I would say in the next 2 years, Europe is rapidly catching up. So in terms of looking at skill sets, because I think that is one of the big challenges for the regulatory area, because this again comes back to the non-traditional. You know, we've classically looked at skill sets and regulation, you know, around, you know, clinical disciplines, pharmacy and the healthcare practices, the life sciences, engineering, all of those areas. Tech is the really kind of big area, I think, for us to integrate in. So the EMA, essentially under the work of the steering group for the big data task force work, is looking at skills gaps and analysis, is developing training programs and curricula for regulators. So that's what's happening kind of centrally. We are part of that, but as an agency ourselves, we are obviously looking at that. I also think because of the range of products that we regulate, and I mean, we're not just confined to medicines, we obviously regulate medical devices. We have a role in the regulation of cells, tissues, organs for transplantation. And with the complexity of products, you know, we are going to end up with a much bigger drive towards clustered expertise across Europe. I don't think any agency is going to have everything within their package. So for us, under our new strategy, it's very much so of carving out the interests areas for us. You know, I think we're very well positioned for convergence, and I think digitalization comes into there. I've mentioned the cell and gene therapies already. So what we are looking at now is, you know, how do we get the best of blended skill sets, you know, the kind of recruitment that Darren was mentioning there that we can now see being advertised. So that for us, I think, will be a combination of upskilling internally, but also attracting talent from other sectors. And again, I think for public sector organizations, that's challenging, because particularly when you're trying to attract from tech to bring into organizations like us, you know, salary and, you know, competitiveness with that sector becomes an issue and a consideration. So, you know, we are thinking, you know, kind of outside of the box in terms of how do we do this. And this is all about the ecosystem and the partnerships that we've seen work very well for us in the area of cell and gene therapies. We're now really looking at the whole area of digitalization to see, you know, how can we adapt what we've done in other models and bring it into there. So I think our focus will be very much so there over the next 5 years. That's a long answer, so sorry, Marie.
No, it's great because you actually covered one of the areas I was going to ask you about was what do you think regulation will look like in the future, and I think you've really covered that very well with your answers. So I think that's it. Matt, if I could just ask you one more question, please, just in terms of you have the broader view of the biopharma industry across Ireland. Do you think Irish biopharma is competitive?
Yeah, it is at the moment. I think I suppose the strength of the sector bears that out. But competitiveness is something that we find ourselves focusing on a more or less continual basis, because the danger is that you relax or rest on your laurels or assume that, excuse me, the next investment project will come into Ireland. As you know, Mairead, working within the industry, each new investment is hard fought and hard won. And you're rated against a series of very, I suppose, demanding KPIs in terms of will you get the next investment. We are a region which has a favorable rate of corporation tax, which is a huge advantage. And obviously that's something that as a country we need to defend at all costs. We do know that we're in an environment where that will change, and BEPS will see that happening. And I think that as well as attempting to defend our tax rate, we now need to look to other, I suppose, components of competitiveness, in that's possibly no longer a given. So therefore, when it comes to costs, huge focus on that. And that's across the entire, I suppose, range of components of costs of goods. So therefore, and in, I suppose, reflecting many of the comments already heard, the role of technology will become increasingly important for the industry. And we're working with Pharma, a local company. We published a report on Pharma 4.0 at the beginning of last year. And we see 4.0, or I suppose digitization of manufacturing, as a logical or the only way forward probably for the sector. So therefore, a lot of the focus, I think, needs to be on how that can be brought into the actual practical sort of manufacturing environment. So as well as encouraging companies to embrace those principles and encouraging government to support that, we think there's also obviously an opportunity for local service providers to assist there. And then when you look at artificial intelligence or so-called immersive technologies, these will become part of the manufacturing environment in the future. That's, I think, a given. And Ireland needs to be part of that also. So therefore, we would see 4.0, the broad definition of 4.0 has been an imperative, and the support that the whole process of digitization brings to that. We are indeed in the advanced therapeutics area. We have been working closely with IDA and with EY around digitization of supply chain as applies to advanced therapeutics. And we see an opportunity for Ireland in that space. And again, you're looking at bringing technologies not familiar to the pharmaceutical industry, such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, into that space. So therefore, that's going to challenge the types of people who work in the industry. So there'll be a talent requirement, as Darren has referred to. And also, I think that we do have an opportunity, and that we do have these sectors in Ireland. So convergence must be something that we embrace in a very proactive and positive way. So we do have the companies who are, I suppose, leaders in the technology field located in this country. We have the leaders in biopharma located in this country. We have the leaders in medtech located in this country. So that's an opportunity. And we do have, I believe, a growing base of locally based companies who have expertise in that area. We operate a skill net, a biopharmachem skill net, and we've recently piloted the application of artificial or virtual reality to training in the sterile environment, which is obviously an environment which is difficult to train in because of trying to retain product safety or the safety of clean rooms. So we actually are piloting virtual reality in that area, which is very interesting. And then we are aware of other companies and the work that NIBRD is conducting in that space as well. So competitiveness is key. We need to jealously guard it and assume that there are those around the world who will always say they are more competitive than Ireland. And if the global tax environment changes, which it will do, that will be accentuated and highlighted by our competitors, believe me. So we need to ensure that we're, as a country and as an industry, we're ready to compete and to hang on to this industry, because it's such an important component of the Irish economy.
Thanks, Matt. I have to say I agree with everything that you've outlined there. Lorraine or Breed, I think I'm going to hand back over to you.
Thanks, Maurice. That's great. A couple of questions for the panel from Paul Condon. The first one: IDA has a spillover pillar to their new strategy, driving multinational companies and FDI companies to buy from local Irish companies. How can Guaranteed Irish and Pharma support this pillar? Maybe with our joint hats on, Mairead, we could try and answer that. Certainly from the Guaranteed Irish point of view, the more pharmaceuticals that we have involved and we can represent, the more of a voice you have. So we would really welcome the Indigenous homegrown pharmaceutical sector to join us, because apart from the panelists that we have today, we have so many other great thought leaders in the space here involved at Guaranteed Irish, and it's important to learn from them and to feed into them. And obviously there's business to be done with them as well. So we would really welcome that engagement, and that can be done through the guaranteedirish.ie website, and just fill out an inquiry form and we'll talk to you about that and engage you with and introduce you to the right people insofar as we can. But I think there's an opportunity as well for the multinationals, and I think they're quite happy to work with the Indigenous, aren't they, Mairead?
Yeah, one of the things that I've referenced earlier, and it's a well-known statistic, is that, you know, there are 30,000 people directly employed, but there are 30,000 indirectly employed. So these are companies, often smaller, Indigenous, local and regionalized companies, you know, that are employing the additional 30,000 that are helping to support the business. So I certainly would feel that the industry, you know, really does benefit those smaller Indigenous Irish industries.
And we've seen that across the spectrum with all our sectors. And even, Matt, to reference your point there, where Ireland is positioned as leaders in med tech as well as tech, there's a real opportunity for that partnership to deepen and to not work in silos, I suppose, and to be a little bit more integrated, isn't it?
Absolutely. And recently in IBEC, we just launched a digital health initiative, which is actually a collaboration between the three associations in IBEC that represent biopharma, tech and tech. And that's a program that we'll be rolling out over this year and following years. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And on the more general point, I think that biopharma companies do see a role for themselves in supporting local industry, whether that's through dealing directly with companies, but also maybe offering their services to mentor and to help and to assist. And as an association, Biopharmachem Ireland, we actively work with local suppliers. In fact, we even have some associate members engaged within the work of our association who could be in the support services such as supply chain, so on and so forth. So absolutely. And it's interesting, I mean, especially when you go outside Dublin and go to some towns, you can see the impact of the pharmaceutical industry. I always think of Westport in that regard because I holiday there, and I can see the impact of AbbVie, formerly Allergan, in terms of supporting an entire ecosystem within a town. And you can see it even in the restaurants and even in the hotels that are in that town. A lot of that is supported by having a very large and vibrant pharmaceutical company in the region. So huge role to play. The 30,000 number, I think it's probably understated. It probably is higher, but we're conservative when we say one-on-one job created. Huge impact. And I think most who work in the industry are happy to do that and proud that they can do it.
And share. Yeah.
I might come in, Bree, just to make one point on it, is that Matt mentioned competitiveness, you know, and how we strive to continue to keep ourselves competitive. The Indigenous component of any ecosystem is part of that competitiveness. And like, whether it's suppliers, whether it's support, or whether it's new players in the field, like in terms of new therapy, you know, through research and innovation, therapy development. And I think we've been successful probably on the first two, suppliers and support. maybe less successful on the development of new indigenous companies that are producing new medicines, and actually on the scale up of manufacturing and so on in that space. So that's an opportunity for us to focus on. And I was very interested in that particular spillover pillar from IDA strategy. And I think that's certainly an area that we'll be focused on.
Okay, so that's great to hear and encouraging. Catherine Ostwald has a question for you. It's two parts to it. It's in relation to the future of the health system and also the availability of medicines in Ireland. And maybe, Lorraine, I'll direct this towards you. We know how important and significant the pharma industry is for Ireland, but we also know the Irish population has slower access to medicines than its European peers. So many products produced in Ireland are not available or available delayed to the population here. How, in your opinions, can this be changed?
Thanks, Bridge, and thanks, Catherine. And it's never a good thing to begin answering a question by telling you what I can't tell you. But I guess from our point of view, we don't have any role as an agency in relation to medicines pricing, procurement, or even health technology assessment. But that having been said, I do think the question raises a really valuable point. So in relation to how regulation needs to change into the future, and I'll come back to that. I suppose, Catherine, looking at this from the point of view of evidence, data, and the scientific evaluation, which is kind of our territory in our world, I think what we can do, is much closer alignment with requirements for health technology assessment of medicines, and particularly novel medicines, to ensure that from the beginning of the development cycle that they are aligned. So you don't come to the end of the process and then you're looking for a health technology assessment and suddenly a company really discovers they have to go back and create an entirely new data set to meet those needs, which can add to the delay. So it is about streamlining those two processes and evolving them. And a lot is happening there. I mean, in Ireland, we've worked very closely with the National Centre for Pharmacoeconomic Evaluation, and that is something we are really pushing in developing that relationship and harmonizing, and also looking at exploring things like sharing of expertise between the two organizations as well, so that we get really good cross-fertilization going. Equally at European level through the EMA, you'd have seen as well too, I'm sure, that there are huge strides kind of been taken there to build the HTA requirements into the assessment of novel medicines. Scientific advice is a life cycle, an early life cycle intervention, like in the development life cycle I'm speaking about here, whereby companies can receive advice from regulators to help their development program. So we're now kind of bringing forward a program of joint HTA and regulatory scientific advice coming together at the early stages. So they are really promising initiatives for agencies like mine as well. And this is something under our new strategy under the next 5 years that I've spoken about earlier. One of the very different pillars in that will be the alignment between product regulation and healthcare delivery in practice, and really looking at those as two processes that there is much better alignment between, because for too long they have been too distinct. I think, in the normal course of what we do in regulatory oversight, we are made much more effective in terms of benefit risk decision making by understanding how health products are used in practice. I mean, that's obviously a given. But equally, I think it's where we put the regulatory effort. In order for that to be value adding, we really need to understand what the needs of the health system actually are. What are the gaps, and how can we be more effective? How can we be much more impactful in sort of addressing those gaps? For us as an agency, we have authorised 7,500 medicines for use in Ireland. The fact of the matter is that of those, 4,000 are only ever marketed. So that's a considerable proportion of our effort that doesn't necessarily derive a huge amount of patient benefit. So it is about tightening those interfaces between healthcare delivery and regulation, but also looking at the trends in terms of how healthcare is going to change. We know that a lot more care is going to be delivered in the home in the future. What does that mean? And, in that context, health products become, and particularly kind of, digitalized health products become really, really important in that context. So kind of positioning the health system needs and the regulatory needs becomes hugely important. clinical research, the numbers of clinical trials that are performed in Ireland are really, really low in comparison to other countries of our size. And clinical trials are a really important element of creating access for patients to novel medicines. And that, again, for us will be another focus area, not entirely obviously within our own remit to bring forward, but we are an important stakeholder within it. And it is through collaboration and working with others that I think we can become much more effective in this area. Okay.
Thanks for that, Lorraine. There is another part to the question from Catherine, but I think you've actually answered a lot.
I've answered it in terms of the silo thinking. It is all about engagement, Catherine, at one level or another, and understanding needs and requirements and working to support each other.
And could I just add as well, just within MSD and as an industry, we do recognise the challenges that face healthcare funding in Ireland, and particularly in light of the current outbreak. But as an industry, we are firmly committed to working collaboratively with the government and with the HSE to help find a solution to the issue of access.
I think it's going to be very important in the context of advanced therapeutics as well, that, if we're going to be I suppose, a realistic and sustainable location for development and manufacture of these, we need to address the issue of access in the advanced therapeutics area as well. It's really important, I think, that we have a sort of a holistic and end-to-end approach to it. And I would echo what Lorraine has said. Mairead also mean early consultation, early collaboration, I think, would be key. So I think that as well as being an economic driver, the industry needs also to have the needs of Irish patients to the very front at all stages, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I might just come in, for anyone who knows my background would know that I've been in maybe the unique position of having been in leadership positions in pharma, in the Department of Business Enterprise and the Department of Health. So when you talk about, the need to integrate and ensure that the siloed thinking is minimized, I fully agree. I've probably seen it from all angles. I do think there are green shoots. So I think that, and again, to go back to your comments, Lorraine, about kind of that maybe quasi kind of transformative effect of COVID in the last year, you're starting to see more direct engagement between the silos. And I think just an example of that is the vaccine task force. To see that the Martin Shanahan, head of IDA, is sitting on that task force says an awful lot. That would have been an entirely health-driven task force maybe a few years ago. So for me, a particular bugbear of mine would always have been HTA, as a mechanism, is frankly using 19th century tools to evaluate. It's not integrated. It doesn't factor in quality of life benefits and the kind of cascade effect. We're well able to talk about economic benefit of one job plus one associated job plus maybe 3 more associated jobs, but that knock-on benefit to quality of life of delivering medicines as effectively and efficiently as possible doesn't get factored into a HTA. HTA is purely a price-driven mechanism.
Yeah, if I could maybe just come back in there, Mairead, as well, just another point really struck me, particularly as Matt was speaking there. I mean, when we really look at innovative medicines, particularly the cell and gene therapy area, and I guess it's been the trend, ironically, in medtech for years, and I always say this, cell and gene therapies is as much as it's about an approval process and creating access in that way, it's also about a life cycle management process, because much of the evidence, we're in a different position to gather evidence upfront. So it's a continuum of gathering evidence. So that feedback from healthcare delivery is going to be so important in relation to the regulatory oversight for cell and gene therapies. So for that reason, the partnership, and I really think, the whole digitalization of healthcare delivery is really important here, even as a source of evidence in terms of real world evidence, speaks to the point Darren has made there as well too. So joining up these components, and this is something we've done really well as a country in the context of Brexit. I mean, how we have managed Brexit has been a huge exercise in partnership right across all levels, from the healthcare sector, but also the government and also the industry. And I think, we did a really excellent job. And, while I'm talking to the sector this morning, I think huge thanks is due to the industry for the level of preparation that was put into Brexit and managing it as a process. And I think really, in that process, we put patients at the center of the issue and look at, how well we have managed that situation. I know it's still early days, but I think we did extremely well as a country there in managing it.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much to our panel, and I think you've given a really good holistic answers to the questions and the approach to, I suppose, making ourselves even stronger in the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector going forward from 2021. I'd like to thank very much the panel, particularly Lorraine Nolan, who is incredibly busy. Lorraine, thank you so much for your time, and I know you're working around the clock at the moment, so we really appreciate you giving us that time. Mairead, of course, my colleague on the board of Guaranteed Irish and MSD leader now here in Ireland for the human health side. Darren from CEO of Navert. Thank you so much, Darren, from the overview from all your roles. I suppose it's great to get that integrated approach and overview. And Matt, as always, from Biopharmachem Ireland through IBEC, has always been supportive, and thank you for your time. In terms of going forward, if people want to look at this who haven't been able to see it, the webinar has been recorded, and we'll make it available online through guaranteedirish.ie. And of course, we're available on all of those touch points across all those platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Insta. We might not put you on Insta, but we'll put you on LinkedIn for sure. More appropriate, and a link, of course, to Twitter. In terms of going forward, there are other events coming down the line for Guaranteed Irish, so please visit us on our event for the next 6 months, and it's available to download there for you. Quite a lot of activities on across all the sectors, and as I said from the very top, and actually which was a theme going through the session today, it's all about integration. Pharma, it doesn't stand alone on its own. It works with tech, it works with all the different aspects of business, medtech, and we're all in this together. And I think it's a nice way to end it up. Our strapline in Guaranteed Irish is all together better. And I think by the integrated approach and holistic approach from all sectors working and pushing to do the right thing by Ireland and look after our people and patient at the centre of everything first and foremost, I think we will get through the tough times that we're in. Very grim January, there's no doubt about that. But I suppose our objective in Guaranteed Irish is to support and to give some hope. And I thank my panelists so much for doing that this morning. I think you've been inspirational and continued success in your own roles. And I do wish you some R&R at some stage, although I feel it'll be towards the end of this year. So thanks for giving us the time and continued success. And we really appreciate all that you're doing for us at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Breed.
Breed. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Breed.
Thank you, Breed.
Thanks, Breed. Thank you.